Hi, everybody. This is Max Terzano. I wanted to take a quick minute to just add a little bit before the podcast. During the first episode, we do say that we're not going to talk about how the United States ended up with Haiti's debt, but we dug into it a little bit and it actually ended up just extremely fascinating. So it would be a disservice not to talk about it. So the next episode is not going to be about current events, like I say towards the end of this episode. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into that debt and what happened and how the United States ended up with it, because it'll blow your minds. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back to Farms and Frontlines. I'm your host, Max Terzano, and I'm joined as always by Major Jessica Rudo.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We launched the podcast not even a week ago as of this recording,
Hooray.
and it's had over 100 listens, and
Yay.
that's very exciting. And I just want to take a second to thank everybody who's listened to it, rated it, reached out with any suggestions or anything like that. Super grateful because we do this just because we enjoy doing it, but
Yep,
I'm very happy to hear that other people have been learning and enjoying it as well. So hopefully you'll continue to enjoy what we're putting out.
I hope so.
That's the idea. Today on this episode, we're actually pretty excited to talk about the history of Haiti.
hmm
Eventually, what we want to do here is talk about kind of the birth of a nation, the first country that was ever successfully formed out of a slave revolt, why they had such a tough history and a tough time. I don't want to say growing up, but essentially just growing.
Kind of getting their feet under them. Yeah.
Exactly. It was their feet were literally kind of cut out from, well, I guess literally and figuratively cut out from underneath them at every opportunity, whether it was from foreign powers, natural disasters,
Yeah.
debt hampering them, everything and anything that you can imagine that would go wrong with the country kind of did. And the reason we want to talk about Haiti in this particular podcast is because if you're following and you're up to date with what's been going on in Haiti in the past few years, they've had a really hard time with things again with natural disasters, and there's a lot of international aid and humanitarian aid going over there. And Jess, you sent not that long ago an article to me about rice being sent over from the US that was laced with arsenic.
Yeah, they found a super high level of arsenic in the rice that was being exported from the US down to Haiti. And it just kind of made me wonder, why does Haiti need rice exports? Because Haiti has such a history with producing its own rice. So it kind of led us down a rabbit hole that now we're going to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And this may be 2 episodes if we can be succinct, but knowing us,
Yeah.
it'll probably be 3 episodes. Uh, so let's just dive right into the history of Haiti. It was founded by, well, not founded, I guess discovered by
Yeah, discovered, yeah.
an embattled discoverer, one Christopher Columbus.
One Christopher Columbus.
Yep, when he landed and thought he was in the Indies, that idiot. He
What a dum dum.
what a dummy. He landed, thought he was in the West Indies, and
Claims the island.
decided, yeah, he
Yep.
decided to, I don't know actually if he decided to name it that or not, but it was called Hispaniola at the time.
Well, he names it the island of the Spanish, and then it kind of morphs into becoming Hispaniola.
I mean, yeah,
Um,
because again, the Isle of the Spanish, we go back to him being a dum dum. What a dumb name.
you're so dumb.
So dumb. That's probably what King Ferdinand and Isabella were like, no, we're going to call it Hispaniola.
They're like, well, they should have been call it not Portugal because
Yeah, yeah. Portugal, stay away.
yeah, not Portugal.
So it ends up being, yeah,
Yeah,
being called, eventually becoming known as Hispaniola,
yep.
and it is originally home to the native Taino people.
hmm
And they're, I don't want to say promptly, but over the course of a few decades, you're saying, wiped out
Yeah.
essentially,
By the 1530s, about 7 million will have died for various reasons,
which
but
is unfortunately not a new
no.
scenario when conquistadors end up discovering them or anything like that.
I mean, it's new for this area, right? This is one of the
Right. Yeah.
first foundings and then settlements, but it's not going to be a unique story for Latin America, unfortunately, right? When the
Right.
Spanish and the Portuguese come in, they bring with them various diseases that the native populations have no immune system for. So they are dying in mass numbers to various, European diseases. It's about 30 to 40 years, about 7 million indigenous people will have died on the island of Hispaniola.
Okay, yeah. And you say eventually Columbus brings some of the Taino people back to Spain.
His initial voyage back to Spain to talk about what he found, he does bring a handful of Taino people with him, with the thought of, enslaving them.
Yeah.
Like, look, this is another commodity that we can take out of these islands. Because he is also kind of churching up what's going on. He brings
Right.
those people back, and Isabella is like, these are my people, right? It's the island of the Spanish. You can't enslave them. So technically, indigenous people are not to be enslaved.
Right.
In practice, it's basically enslavement in everything but name. But after that, you don't see the Taino people being shipped back to Europe to be sold into slavery. That doesn't happen.
It's just like a localized kind of thing. Like they're not part of the Atlantic slave trade. They're just, if they're
Correct.
in Hispaniola, they become essentially slaves. And like you said, everything but name.
Yeah, and they are subject to very harsh labor conditions and living conditions and everything else. Their way of life is completely taken from them, and later it will become Christianity. They're converted, their practices are looked at as pagan and, the devil's work. And
Right, of course. Yeah.
and their practices that they had will all be moved to like a European centric focus. But
Right. So, like,
yeah,
again, like nothing new if you've studied
nope.
history and, just same thing happened with, Native
This is kind of
Americans and all that kind of stuff, like those centers where they try to get rid of all of their
mhm.
unchristian
Yep.
practices and religion and all that kind of stuff. Same
And
thing
then
happening
really,
here.
really forcing, yeah, the conversion. And this is kind of the start, right? This is where it's
Right.
going to start. And then it'll have some ebbs and flows, but it's a similar conversation to like most of Latin America in terms of what's happening with the indigenous. But, there's other things. So Columbus had really churched up that he had found gold, that the people were very nice and friendly and welcoming and excited to have conquerors. um, he is telling Isabella and Ferdinand, no, this is great. We got to send more people back. This is going to be awesome. They're going to have no issue with us coming in droves. Like they're welcoming and there's
Right.
tons of gold. And because he says, hey, there's tons of gold, even though he found none, he now has to like double down on finding something to make these explorations profitable.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But now with all these people dying, indigenous people dying, I believe it's 1501. In 1501, Isabella okays the sending of about 500 African slaves to Hispaniola to work in the gold mines and then also starting these sugar plantations. Well,
Mhm.
starting or continuing sugar plantations because, sugar is becoming a really
Like
huge
important commodity.
export. Yeah.
Yeah.
And during this time period in Europe and in England and other parts of the Western world, a sign of wealth was, you had sugar. Sugar was a wealthy person's commodity. And the way that you showed people that you were rich via sugar is you had rotten teeth. So you'd walk up to somebody and flash them your like disgusting smile, and they'd be like,
Terrible teeth.
"Whoa,
Like, whoa, all right, money bag.
whoa, yeah, oh, yeah."
That's hilarious.
It's like instead of like gold chains today or like these humongous bling things that you
Just
wear on your neck,
terrible teeth.
it'd be terrible teeth, yeah, and you'd be like,
Wow.
"Wow, whoa,
Wow.
look at this
Okay.
guy." Yeah,
That's
yeah,
hilarious. Thank gosh that went out of style.
I know.
Much to
Yeah.
dentist's chagrin.
Yeah, right. But anyway, rich people are buying sugar, and then eventually, right? It's everybody wants sugar. Everybody wants everything.
Right.
Something else coming out of Latin America, just because I can throw it in because we're in the area talking
Yep.
about it now, is chocolate. The
Hmm.
practice of like how to use chocolate, how to take like this plant that looks like a slimy bean and like dry it out and mash it up and make it into like hot chocolate.
Hmm.
It wasn't called hot chocolate, but it's the precursor to like a hot chocolate drink. And then later it's going to be mixed with sugar and become like a version of what we think of as like a chocolate bar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, it's coming out of Latin America though.
That also contributed to crappy teeth, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Anywho, so we see like the importance of sugar, needing sugar plantations, and how Hispaniola is now like starting to make the crown some money.
It was Spain for I don't know the exact reasoning behind it, but maybe you do. They eventually end up selling the western half of Hispaniola to France.
Well, they lose the entire island, and Spain and France go to war. And part of the treaty that they end up signing for one of these random wars is they lose Saint Domingue.
Okay,
And
so
Saint Domingue
it's
is what the French will call it.
right.
Hispaniola gets turned over to France. France calls it Saint Domingue, and then we move over from there as like a French colony.
Hmm. And I mean, it was extremely profitable. It was,
Mhm.
I think, what do they call it? The Pearl of the Antilles, which is all of those Caribbean nations,
Yeah,
or
because
colonies.
it is the most profitable colony that France has, and
Right.
this is 1700s time frame.
San Domingo by itself was producing half of like all the sugar and coffee bought and sold in Europe
Hmm.
at that time.
Yeah.
However, this came at the cost of a ton of slaves being moved
Yep.
to the colony. Yeah,
Right.
apparently it also was responsible for, what was it, a third of the Atlantic slave trade?
Yeah, about 750,000 enslaved people will be moved from various parts of Africa, but mostly Western African countries to Haiti. What is now Haiti? Yeah.
So that's kind of the building blocks of this eventual slave revolution that comes up. Like they're moving tons of slaves there to work in the gold mines, the sugar plantations, apparently the coffee plantations,
Mm.
and they just keep moving them over. And there's a ton of people there, right? And there were even some Native Americans because the French had a presence in Louisiana,
Hmm.
and they ended up rounding some up and moving them over after an incident in Natchez, Mississippi.
Oh yeah.
So
Yep.
there's just a ton of slaves, almost a million slaves.
Right. So think about that, and then the disparity in numbers. So there are, almost a million, like 850,000 enslaved people, and then landowners, white landowners. There's like 150.
Right, like it's not
There's
close.
not nowhere near, right?
Yeah,
I gotta look the number up, but it's almost like 1,000 enslaved people to like one white person.
which is
Um,
just
yeah,
like bonkers because like you think of, in the US, like when Nat Turner tried to do his like slave revolt, it's like he got
yep.
so far until it's like, oh hey, there's a whole army
Hmm.
next door. Like,
Whoops.
yeah, like this is in what we now know as Haiti, where it's an island nation. Like no one's coming
Yeah,
immediately,
not fast. Yeah, not
Yeah, but
yeah.
the slaves they got word of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and they started to get a little bit emboldened and like, why are we living like
Yeah,
this?
and that's true for most of Latin America. Most of Latin America is seeing the American Revolution and are inspired that a colony could face against a much stronger colonial power and win.
Right.
The other thing that's happening that you had talked about, right, the Enlightenment. This thought process is changing. How slavery is viewed is changing, especially in France. And France,
Right.
they are abolishing slavery or I don't know if it's abolished in the 1700s. I'm gonna look
I
it up
thought
real
this
quick.
was more of a yeah, please do. But I thought this was just one of those
I know that
like they're like we should still have slaves, but let's treat them better kind of thing.
yeah,
And then eventually they abolish it, but
yeah.
it
So there,
doesn't
right.
reach Saint Domingue.
There's a movement to treat enslaved people better, but that does not make it to Saint Domingue. It actually gets worse. To which people who are enslaved are like, no.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you dumbasses. Like again, like just the number disparity. Like,
Yeah.
what were
Well,
these
I mean,
landowners like?
we are thinking of enslaved people as people, not
Yes,
property,
property.
which is,
Yeah,
right? The how we're looking at everything is, oh,
completely
right,
different. Yeah, it was the product of the times, but still,
yeah.
you want to be like, all right.
Well, yeah, of course. Um, But there is going to be like an uprising, right? So
Yes,
late 1790s. I'm sorry, it should be 1794 is when it's going to start. But I think the rumblings kind of start in 1791. There's going to be some people that are about that stand up and they start thinking about like we can take this over, we can do this, we are going to revolt.
right.
But it takes about 10 years.
I think one of these guys that's important to mention would be Toussaint Louverture.
Yep.
He was the son of like an educated the I think the Britannica article says an educated enslaved person,
Oh,
which is a
well.
nice way of just saying an educated slave.
Hmm.
And he was very religious, fervent Roman Catholic,
Okay.
and was like very opposed to the native like voodoo.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Became like a
yeah.
big thing over there. And he didn't do anything, I think, to like start
The
the
revolution.
revolt. Yeah, the like revolution. Because I think it started in like the northern province, in like you said, in like
Hmm.
1791, but
Yeah.
it started spreading to encompass like thousands and thousands
Hmm.
of slaves across the colony.
Yeah.
And he eventually like helps his former master escape, and then joining the forces who are like burning plantations and
Hmm.
killing any like European or people of mixed ancestry. They called mulattoes.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna. Where are you at in time now? Because that's gonna happen
A little
later.
like later. I think that
Yeah,
that was like a year later, wasn't it? Or
that's
no?
gonna be Jacques Jean Dessalines.
Oh, Desalegn. Yeah, okay.
He is the one that's gonna declare, "Hey,
We
we're
have to kill
black,
all of them. Just
and if you're not black, you're either exiled to the right side of the island or you're dead."
right. Okay, yes, because in the Britannica article here, they had just an art a part about him doing that. He
Hmm.
joins people who were burning the plantations and killing the Europeans and all that, but
Oh, okay. So I might have just misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were saying
not all of
this,
them. Not
this
like
is when
a
like the
decree or
mass.
anything.
Yeah. Okay. 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 Gotcha. Which gets people
Um,
scared. If you're right, you start killing white people, and they're like, "Wait a minute."
yeah, but and I think it's important to mention, like, you and I talked about this, but like they
Mhm.
started burning the plantations and all that stuff because they weren't thinking like, okay, gang, when we win this revolution, what are we gonna do economically? Like, what's
Well,
our plan?
I think even just to backtrack just a little bit, so this revolt is happening because this poor treatment of enslaved people. And again, we talked about white landowners, but almost all of this island is sugar plantations or coffee plantations, some kind of agricultural land that is being worked by physical labor being done by enslaved people.
Yeah,
And that is how Hispaniola or Saint Domingue is being run. It is an export economy based on agricultural goods. That is what it is. There's
yes.
no like internal anything else. It's all export of
Yeah, it
a
was
juiced
founded
thing. Yeah.
literally just
Yeah.
based
Yeah.
on the possibility for all the trade that it could do.
Correct.
It's
All
not
of the
like an
exports that
internal.
can be like kind of taken from the island. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a point where Louverture puts out this decree. We might not make this. We might be enslaved again. So we're going to burn everything. It is a scorched earth tactic so that we have nothing to work if we end up enslaved again, which at the
So
time probably sounded good. Like, yep, just in
yeah,
case,
like
let's
it's
do
a
that.
this is a
Yeah.
whole give me liberty or give me death kind of thing. Like
Yep. Yep.
I'm not going back. We're gonna
Yep.
torch the things that we would be working on. Like
Yep.
this is it. It's a do or die scenario, quite literally. Unfortunately, this is just the first
Mhm.
thing that comes into play when it's talking about hindering Haiti's ability to grow things or just unfortunate circumstances, right? Like whether
Right.
it be a revolution or hurricanes or earthquakes or what have
Mhm.
you. The revolution is really the first time where their agricultural industry takes a huge hit.
They burn almost all of their plantations, and then in 1804, they are granted their independence. Louverture died the year before.
Right, he was captured and taken to
Mhm.
France, where he ends up passing.
Yep.
And how exactly did they win their independence? I think it was like the French just kind of realized it was too much.
It's
Like
similar to
they
like,
started another conflict with Britain, right?
mhm.
Or
Yeah, they have a whole bunch of other things going on because this is when Napoleon is kind of back in, not back in,
right,
but the Napoleonic Wars are taking a lot of
yeah, a lot of their
manpower,
resources.
money, yeah, resources. That's a better word than everything else I was just trying to spit out there. Their resources and the people are not behind like hate like whatever. Like
And Haiti's so far
we've
away.
got yeah, exactly. We've got more pressing things like on our doorstep here.
Right. Okay, that tracks. So
Mm.
because again, like if Haiti was like the only thing, or if Saint Domingo was the only thing the French were
Mhm.
concentrating on, like this would have
Yeah.
it would have taken time because they had to cross the entire Atlantic. But they,
Yeah.
as we see soon, like they definitely had the ability to go there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
So
in
it's yeah,
1804, Saint Domingue is granted its independence and then it is renamed Haiti. How do you say his last name? Desané?
Desaulniers.
Desané?
Yeah, I'm just
He
calling him
renames it
Desaulniers.
Desané. He
Yeah,
renames it.
Desaulniers.
He renames it Haiti. He also names himself Emperor.
Yeah,
And as I mentioned earlier, he is the one that said, if you are one of us, you are black. If you are not black, you need to go on and get to the right side of the island, or we will kill you.
yes,
And that's kind of what happens, right? You do see a slaughtering of the white families that are on the left side of the island, and then everybody else that kind of fits into anything other than black moved over and into what is now the Dominican Republic.
right.
With that being said, now we look at Haiti that has no agricultural output, which its entire economy was based around. They have killed, I don't know what the number is, but multiple white families, right? They slaughter these white
Yeah.
families,
Hmm.
good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Yes.
How, like if you're setting all of this up, you're not setting yourself up for positive international trade agreements.
Right. And
um,
I did read too on top of that. Like it's like we said at the start of the episode, this was the only successful slave revolution that a country
that's
came out of.
That's right. So it's
And
1804. The Americas still have slaves. Everywhere else in Latin America still has slaves. So other countries are like, we're not even going to recognize your independence because then that might embolden other people, like our slaves in our area.
I believe it was Thomas Jefferson. He worked pretty hard not recognize Haiti just
Yeah.
because of that same reason. He did not want the slaves in America to getting, I guess, any ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting too, like Jefferson is all for even the French Revolution. And
Hmm.
then once they start chopping heads off, he's like, actually,
You know what? On second thought,
maybe you went just a bit too far there. And it's the same thing with Haiti, where it's like at first there is like aid given, and then when it's successful, he's like, yeah, we're not gonna
maybe not, maybe
actually,
not.
yeah, maybe not. And then the U.S. doesn't recognize Haiti as a country until 1862. So like the
Yeah,
second year of the Civil War is when they recognize slavery.
and that's like almost 60
Not,
years. I mean, actually, it
I
is.
just said,
Yes.
I just said recognize slavery, recognize Haiti.
Yeah. Okay, we got you.
Yeah,
But that's still like 60 years after Haiti was, created, officially
yeah,
declared a
yeah,
country by Desalegn and
yeah.
company.
Hmm.
But they're essentially like ignored by the global community, the
Hmm.
Western world, and they were in solidarity with France, being like, nope, we're not looking at you. And they essentially isolated Haiti from partnership in world affairs, which for a country that was based off of their exports
Right,
is brutal. So for that time
right.
period, they were just trying to survive and I guess rebuild the stuff that they had burned and scorched earth and all that stuff. But it's like this wasn't their expertise. So
Yeah, and just like
just
everywhere else, like they're building a new government from nothing. So
yeah,
every other, like you'll see every other country, including the United States, like have some trials and tribulations of like, what does an effective government look like? How does it run? They're working through that as well.
right. And I mean, we saw that with like early on, right?
Hmm.
Like you
Hmm.
had Saline, he declares himself emperor, but we also had someone 2 years later who declared
Yep.
himself king
King. Yep.
at the same time. So they obviously had to nix that and figure out their government. And this was really like one of the only times in their history, though, that they were just Haiti foreign by Haitians, right? Like this was the only time where like foreign entities weren't playing a role in how they governed, who was elected, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to say indefinitely, but like, or I don't want to say 100% either way. I'm not sure, but it is definitely a time period where the foreign interventions are not so much government related, but more so economically related.
After being isolated for that period of time,
Hmm.
France ends up like they go back, they kind of request to be included, right? Like because they're
Yeah,
they're struggling, and France saddles them with this just enormous debt. Like it's
right,
ridiculously huge. I think in terms of like today's money, it was like somewhere between 20 to 30 billion dollars. And this is a
it's
country that
yeah,
literally has nothing, right? Like they just came
right,
out of this bloody revolution. They haven't been a part of the world stage, and now they've got to pay 20 to 30 billion dollars to France for essentially like reparations to the slave owners and their descendants.
right. So this is 1825, and it's called the Haiti Independence Debt. Where you're right. So it is the equivalent of $21 billion in 2023 terms. But at
Which
the
like
time,
that's
it's 150 million francs. And exactly what you were saying. The reason is for lost revenue coming out of Haiti declaring its independence.
which again, I mean, like that just goes to show you how profitable Haiti was to the French. If it was like $21 billion worth
Yeah.
of stuff, in today's money.
So it's 20 years later. And just for comparisons, right? When the United States earned its independence from Great Britain, the United States did not pay Great Britain anything.
Right.
It did owe France money, but France lent the United States money. But in
It's
this
interesting.
is not what this is. This is asking for money lost because Haiti became its own country. And
And I
then
think I think that's an interesting comparison because like the US did become its own country, but it was by a bunch of white people.
it's just, well, I think that's probably something else too, right? Like, is this country in any kind of shape to like stand up for itself?
Right.
And there's no international community to back it either.
Right. Because yeah, they were completely isolated. So they
Mhm.
really had no option. They kind of had to either accept France's offer of this massive debt or stay isolated, and just that really wasn't an option. But we mentioned the debt because it was so big that like they couldn't pay it at once, right? Like they
Yeah.
didn't have that kind of money at all.
And
So
the other thing is France demands these payments via warship.
yeah.
It's not like they sent a letter like, "We want you to pay this." They
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no, that exactly. They show up with like a flotilla of
yeah.
warships. Like so it was basically like Haiti had a gun to its head.
Mhm.
You're going to pay this, tough luck. That's it.
Yeah.
And so Haiti was like, okay, but we can't all at once, right? So here's
Yeah.
we're going to offer you these payments. They actually had to take out massive loans from a French bank,
Hmm.
and that was positive for the bank's shareholders,
Yeah.
which they enjoyed. But that's just another way that France really like was not great to the country,
Which
and
doesn't make
it's
sense either. They're borrowing money from France, like
to
French
pay
banks,
back
to
France.
pay back France.
I know, but I'm assuming there was like massive interest on that loan as well.
And
So it's like on
this,
top of the debt that they had to pay back this interest.
I just don't understand how nobody else was like, no, no. Like
Yeah,
you lost that island. Like get over it. Next.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, it's extremely crazy because like I can't find any incident where something similar happens.
And all of Latin America, when they gain independence from Spain or Portugal, well, Brazil is going to be like the only weird exception, but they gain independence and then that's it.
Right. End of story.
Well, I mean, like that's the end of, no, we don't owe you money now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
not paying for this independence via like an actual loan.
Which is again why this is like such a unique circumstance where like yes, only country to pop out of a successful slave revolution, but then they're saddled with this huge debt that everyone's just like, yeah, you have to pay that. But
It takes them until, oh, it's just so nuts.
it gets worse.
Yeah, it takes until 1947. So it's
Yeah.
122 years to pay off the debt and then the associated interest.
Yeah, and
On
the crazier part that we won't even get into, like their final payments are made to what is now Citibank.
Yeah,
Used to be the National City Bank of New York. So it was, started off with France and it ended up being transferred to the US. Again, that's a whole crazy thing that we won't get into, but it takes them literally over 120 years for them to finally pay off all of this debt. And it's just super important to talk about because the debts they've been denounced by some historians and activists as really responsible for like the root cause of Haiti's poverty today and a possible case of like odious debt, which in like
yeah,
international law is just an unfair debt, is punishable by the International Criminal Court and all that kind of stuff. But there's been no, I think there's been a few people after the 2010 earthquakes in Haiti who were like, we should really pay Haiti back some of that money. And multiple French presidents have just been like, yeah, I don't know about that.
yeah. And which, I mean, if there's a case for the odious debt, this is it. This is
This is
crazy.
it. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a
Mm,
huge reason for that. I mean, like that. So just to like quickly recap that, they're discovered. The Spanish and French bring in tons of slaves from Africa
mm-hmm.
to just farm this and mine this extremely profitable island, right?
Hmm.
It gets sold to France. They continue to do that and build on that. Eventually, American Revolution, French Revolution, the slaves are emboldened. They revolt. They're successful. They take over the island or the half of the island. They take over San Domingo, call it Haiti, and then they're shut off from everybody. They're
Yeah,
just completely blocked off. They have nothing and no one. And like they can't. It's not like they're gonna talk to the Spanish half of the island. I don't know the history of the Dominican Republic yet. It's not something I studied, but they've already like ran out everybody who's not black to that side
no,
of the island. So it's like they
yeah,
don't have good relations.
it's not a friendly relationship. No.
Yeah, so they're literally and figuratively on an island, right?
Hmm.
And so it's tough for them. So eventually, the French come back, are like, you owe us for all of the potential revenue we could have been making or could have made.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly how they came up with that number, but it's this massive debt that really hampers Haiti, and they've been paying it off since then. So it's over 120 years of just this massive debt that they've been paying off. And on top of that, like we mentioned before, the plantations were destroyed. They were burned. Like the agriculture was
Right.
not starting off on a great foot when Haiti, as Haiti, came to life.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's just they have that, they have the damaged property that they have to
Hmm.
repair. Then they have this massive debt that people say is largely responsible for their poverty today.
Hmm.
And on top of that, we have just the position of Haiti in the world, like geographically. It's in an area that's extremely prone to natural disasters.
It's a hot spot.
Yeah, it's not great. What do they have? I think there are years where they have like 3 hurricanes, like
And
in one year.
yeah, and it'll come at like the most inopportune time if we're looking back at its history. Massive earthquakes, really, really bad hurricanes, wiping out any like infrastructure that was set up. It's going to have huge consequences, all of these natural disasters.
Yeah, including just completely destroying harvests that are like ready to come in, like all of this
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Yep.
Haiti's just in an extremely tough spot regarding natural disasters, which leads to influx of humanitarian aid over the years, which we will actually talk about in the next episode. If you stick with us, we're going to talk about how Haiti got to where it currently is at, with 80% of the capital being controlled by gangs. It's a wild ride. From these gangs were basically formed to support individual politicians and stuff like that. The leader of one of the main gangs was a former elite police officer who currently goes by the name Barbecue. So,
I mean, if that's not enough to listen, I don't know what else.
right, that's pretty enticing stuff right there.
Barbecue,
I
you
want to say,
say?
like, who doesn't love a good barbecue? But here's one that I think you might not enjoy too much. So that's the next episode. But after that, we also want to really talk about, the farms portion of this. We talked about the plantations of like coffee and sugar, but rice is a huge part
Yeah.
of Haiti's history, as Jess you alluded to. You want to
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that?
what we're looking at too is almost the inverse. We're looking at the importation of rice into Haiti from the U.S. and just recently being found to be full of arsenic, like way above what natural levels there should be, and also very like akin to plastic.
Yeah, which
So it's a really poor food stuff that's getting imported into Haiti, and kind of looking at the importance of rice, where, the African roots of rice starting in Haiti, the
that
diet portion
has
of that. Yeah, yeah.
the like how it got to Haiti in the first place
Mhm.
was when you were telling me just yesterday when we were
Yeah,
going over the notes. Like that, it was super cool. Like I don't know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just very ingenuitive and creative thinking on
yeah.
how it got there. So yeah, that's going to be this next episode, and then potentially another episode after that,
We'll
because
see how
there's a
we do
lot of stuff
because
here we don't want to do
Mhm.
any injustice to it. So hopefully you'll
Yeah,
continue to listen and enjoy yourselves and learn something, because I do think this is all really cool and a lot of history that people don't really know. And again, we're not diving in, we're not going super deep. It's just kind of
yeah.
a
And we're not experts. We're also
we're not.
learning at
We're
the same time.
learning this stuff
Yeah.
here too. So if we're wrong, you can actually now email us at farmsandfrontlines@gmail.com. If you have any questions or stuff that you'd like for us to answer on potential future episodes, I'd love to hear from you all.
Yeah, it'd be
We
great.
also have some social medias that we're starting to get off the ground. Instagram and Threads, which is just at Farms and Frontlines. Working on creating a website where you'll be able to find notes and listen to the episodes online there as well. Be sure to follow us and send in any
Exciting.
thoughts or questions. Thank you again to everybody who's listened already to the episodes we have up. Truly appreciate it. Anybody who's rated us or talked to me or Jess about just your thoughts, and really, really appreciate it all. So hope you
Yes,
continue to
here.
listen.
We do. Thank you so much.